So, Jim Riley, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
As always, I like to do a little bit of stalking around on all my guests, pre-chat. And man, your list of credits, what you've done is truly astounding. So I'm just going to reel off a couple here, if I may. Drummer and MD for the multi-platinum group Rascal Flatts. And continuing from there, Nashville session legend. I know you're a humble man, but I'm going to put it out there. Nashville session legend. TV credits, Grammys, Tonight Show, American Music Awards, published author with a phenomenal books, Survival Guide for the Modern Drummer, and Song Charting Made Easy. Not to mention an acclaimed and award-winning educator. So there are obviously many paths we could take this chat because you've done it all, man. You've done it all. Now, I don't like to make my guests repeat themselves too much, and I know you've done a bunch of interviews and podcasts, so I'll throw it over to you. Do you want to give a bit of a background on yourself, or should we palm it off to a different interview, for example, the Rich Redmond one? What are your thoughts on that?
Man, it doesn't really matter to me. I mean, for me, I grew up in the New England part of the United States, so up in Boston, really far away from the country music thing that I've gotten involved with in Nashville. I started taking lessons with a guy named Arthur Press, who was in the Boston Symphony. Arthur was fantastic. I was lucky enough to take some lessons with Alan Dawson as well, who was local to me there. And then my band director in high school had gone to North Texas. And so he kind of put that place on my radar. And I ended up going to North Texas, then North Texas State, now the University of North Texas. And got my degree in music education, marched in the drumline there. I was there with people like Keith Carlock. He was on the drumline in 1989. My really good friend Jason Sutter, who's played with Cher and Marilyn Manson and Foreigner, and I mean he's my college roommate.
Wow.
And so went to North Texas. Got my degree in music education. I think that was really great for me. Being in Texas, I got more exposed to country music than some other people would have up in the north. And then I moved to Nashville in 1997, which was a couple years later, and ended up, because of some of that early exposure to country music, kind of being able to blend right in, and ended up getting my first really big gig a year into being here, which was really phenomenal. I was with a country singer named Mark Chestnut, who was really popular in the 90s, had a lot of hits there. And when my buddies, who ended up being Rascal Flatts, got a record deal, they asked me if I would come play with them. And so I actually left a really established artist to go play with a brand new one, and it ended up being a pretty good decision. So I had a 20-year run with Rascal Flatts, and wow. That was there's definitely a lot to unpack there. But alongside that, I've always been someone who's been really involved in education. And so I've the whole time I've been with Rascal Flatts, I've also been teaching everything from private lessons to group lessons to having people come and do, weekend camps with me. I published actually 3 books, although the third one is not very widely published, just because I'm really just trying to figure out what the best lanes are for some of those things are these days. I think that the information in say my third book is really important. But I think that the ways that people consume information now are different than they were just 5 years ago. So it really kind of makes you go, okay, this is all great information. How do I get this out to the people?
Absolutely. And Jim, we will definitely link to the Drum Dojo and your books in the show notes. So we will definitely let people know all about that, because they are highly acclaimed and recommended books. Absolutely.
I've been very fortunate that Survival Guide for the Modern Drummer has been used by teachers and students around the world. My motivation for writing that book was, I remember I was in Canada, and I was stuck in a hotel room for like 2 days. And it was right at the beginning of Facebook Messenger. And one of my college friends just said, "Hey, what are you doing?" "I'm on Facebook Messenger. So are you?" And I said, "I'm stuck in a hotel room in Canada for the next couple of days." He says, "Well, what are you going to do?" I says, "Well, I'm thinking about starting on a book." He says, "Well, what are you going to do it on?" And I said, "Well, I've been thinking about it a lot." I said, I've decided to do a styles book. I said, I want to try to put out there the message that if you can play in a multitude of styles, that you can, stay busier as a professional musician rather than, if you're doing one thing. He said, "I think that's a terrible idea." He says, you should write about something, that you're really specialized at, and write something about that. I said, I understand that. I said, I get that. I said, but I want to write something that really kind of speaks to my experience. And so I feel like I can do a really good job of this. Obviously, there's been a couple of other books that have approached this subject. The ones that would come to mind would Steve Houghton did a styles book, and Tommy Igoe also did a styles book. And both were very influential to me in doing my book. I didn't take either of their books lightly, and I know both of those guys personally. So for me, I was like, if I can't really bring something new and substantial to the conversation, I don't think I should even join. So I set out to go, you know what, I'm going to make these tracks the most realistic tracks that have ever been done. I want to make sure that they are just so a part of the experience, whether if you're playing jazz music, I want this to be with real jazz players. If you're playing metal, I want this to be with real metal players. If you're playing blues, I want to play with real blues players. And I understand that doing that takes way more time and way more money. But that's just what I decided to do. That was going to be my angle. And the second part of the angle was that I wanted to make sure to broaden the idea of what it was to play styles. So I wanted to do a healthy amount of country, and I wanted to add things that normally don't get talked about, like, in a styles book, like reggae or like metal, double bass. These are all things that usually traditionally get stuck. They get left out of a styles book. And I'm like, you know what? They're all important styles. So that was my angle. And the book, I spent a lot of time on it and a lot of money on it, but the book was really well received, and it's been successful in every way. So including financially, it's, so even though I spent a lot of money on it, all of that money came back to me and more, just because people really connected with how much effort I put into the tracks.
Absolutely. Jim, on this interview, I really wanted to get into with you, I guess, for lack of a better term, a little bit of myth busting.
Yeah. You mentioned that.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of busting myths. And I guess just before we sort of head down that path, knowing multiple styles, I realized that that's a really important concept to you. Mm-hmm. And I guess most drummers would echo those thoughts. The difference is you've got the experience. And the difference is you've actually worked in the genres, been paid in the genres, and actually made a living from it. So can you speak a little bit to the experience side of this in terms of, like, I could say, yeah, it's great for you to learn a bunch of styles. Why is it actually a good thing to learn a bunch of styles?
Yeah. So I think that the when we talk about the myth busting side of this, the first thing that would come to mind is this concept that, you know, academia would sell, which is if you can play jazz, you can play anything. And that's not really very close to true at all. And I think that the worst part of that myth is that the people that are playing jazz believe that, because then they actually do themselves a disservice. Every style of music, if you dig into it far enough, is a lot more difficult than people give it credit for. And I'll jump right into what it is that I do, playing a lot of pop music and a lot of country music. Those styles, unlike jazz, there's no place to hide. There's no place to hide. You can't hide in a flurry of stuff. Everything is so angular and so clear that when you're not doing the right stuff, it just becomes blatantly obvious to everyone. And so you can't just take, well, I'm a jazz drummer, I can just dumb it down and do this. No, it just doesn't work that way. You have to, any style that you want to get good at, you have to study it. And if you'll study it, well, the first thing is you have to respect it. And if you respect it, then you'll study it. And if you study it, then you'll learn what the things are that make that style unique. And having been a person that really went, okay, you know, I didn't grow up with country music. I didn't grow up in a part of the country of the United States that is connected with country music. The only country music I heard when I was growing up, and I'm dating myself, as a kid, was Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton.
Nothing wrong with Kenny.
But, well, the thing is with those two, they were really pop stars as much as they were country stars. So I was only catching them at all because they were such big international stars. Right. But having said that, I had very limited access to country music. And so it's very easy to kind of go, oh, that's just some hillbilly stuff. And, you know, you just kind of play some boom chick and you'll be good. And, you know, what I find is that, yeah, a lot of jazz players are very unprepared to play country. And if they don't realize that they're not, that's the worst part. You know, it's okay to be a jazz player and go, I don't know anything about country music. Teach me something. I'll go, let's do it. Yep. But if they go, oh, I got it. I got jazz, so I can play that easy. That's where the big mistake is. So, yeah, it's been being comfortable playing styles has been something that's been very important to me because of the simple fact that I want to be able to say yes as much as possible. So if some guy comes up to me and I remember a Hispanic guy came up to me and he said, hey, I want you to play in my band. I play country and Tejano music. I'm like, I'm in. Let's do this. I want to learn something. And, you know, so I dug into what they were doing and said, all right, let's do this. And that really helped me. Or somebody says, hey, I want you to play in my reggae band. I go, all right, let me dig into this thing. And just really being a student in that way and just understanding that there's a lot I don't know and let me dig into this a little bit has really helped me. And then along the way, just being able to play this multitude of styles has just been able to keep me employed. I mean, you know, I'm playing a lot with Gary LeVox, the lead singer of Rascal Flatts right now, but I also just finished an instrumental rock record. And, you know, those things are not completely congruent to each other, but they're all just work and they're all things that keep me busy. And I think I'm happiest when I'm busy doing a multitude of things, not just like, and this is great for some people. They're like, hey, listen, I got 60 drum students and that's what I do. And I'm a factory unto myself. And I go, that's great. And that's really admirable, actually. But it's not really the way that I usually operate. I'd rather have a couple of students and then a session and then, a lesson online.
Absolutely.
And, just kind of keep it so that I'm not doing enough of any one thing that it drives me crazy, but that I'm always inspired to do the things that I'm doing.
It'd be like eating the same food every day, right? Soon going to get sick of it.
Which sometimes I'm guilty of. But for sure, variety definitely ends up being the spice of life on that for me, because I'm always inspired in whatever I'm doing, whether it's the live playing or whether it's the recording stuff that I'm doing, or if it's the teaching that I'm doing, whether that's in person or online, like I said, both of which I do a lot of.
Yeah, that's amazing. Jim, I'm so glad you brought up respect. I think respect and humility of sort of knowing your lane, knowing what you're good at, knowing what you need to work on. Yeah. I'm pretty old school, man. I've got a lot of fellow teacher friends here locally, and we'll constantly chat and we will sort of comment on the lack of awareness that's around. I'll throw one at you, like, for example, when we're talking about rock and jazz, people playing rock, Dave Grohl, Phil Rudd, and let's say Steve Jordan. If you wrote out the parts that those three players play on paper, they look really simple, right?
Yeah, they look really similar.
Similar, like same beat. Like if rock beat 1 in a lot of cases, or rock beat 2, rock beat 3, whatever. There is such a big difference between notes on a sheet of paper and feel, authenticity, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think that for us and for myself, I'm constantly amazed that people miss this point, that you have to appreciate a genre. You have to listen to a genre.
Yeah.
If you don't listen to rock, how are you going to be good at rock?
Right. Yeah, it's true, man. And even though I grew up with rock and roll and I play rock and roll, and obviously I'm a rock drummer, I'm a country drummer, I'm a blues drummer. I'm just a working drummer. But when I see a drummer that is a pure rock and roll drummer, and I'll give you a couple examples of some people. My good friend who lives here in Nashville, Ray Luzier. Fantastic
drummer.
I mean, Dean Castronovo is another one who's also a friend of mine. And, when you stand next to these guys when they're playing, I mean, listen, I hit the drums pretty darn hard, okay? And I can promise you the time that I did a Rascal Flats, and it was Rascal Flats and Journey Crossroads. You can look it up on the internet and find it. But playing double drums with Dean, I felt like I was hitting the drums like a small child next to the way that he hits the drums, And I mean, he's such a rocker and he's such a star when you're on stage. It really makes you go, okay, I thought I was pretty good at this, but this guy's making me just want to watch him do what he does, man. Absolutely amazing. And, that to me is an example of, okay, I play rock and I am a rock drummer, and I'm going, okay, you know what? I play rock, but I'm not a rock drummer like those guys are a rock drummer. To me, they've put the 10,000 hours into being a rock player that is just like, man, like I'm really in awe of it. And I just missed Ray the other day. I played a clinic at the Music City Drum Show in Nashville, which is a new show, which is really good. It's the third year. My friend Rich Redmond had been scheduled to do it in about a week and a half before Jason dropped a makeup date on the same day as the Music City Drum Show. So Rich asked me if I was available. Long story short, I was. And so I was able to jump in there. And Ray had done Saturday, and I did the Sunday. I would have loved to have caught up with Ray, but we'll have to do that another time.
I love Rich, man. I've had Rich on the podcast. He's just, he's one of my favorite people.
Well, Rich and I mean, he may have told you, but I mean, we knew each other at North Texas, and then we met within the first week that I moved to Nashville. We moved to Nashville basically the same month, and exchanged phone numbers, ended up living together for at least 6 months or so. I mean, I was quite literally sleeping on he had one of those minivans, you pull the couches out to put the drums in, and I was sleeping on that little couch in his living room for 6 of probably the first 9 months that I lived in Nashville.
Wow. Well, it makes for a great story.
So we go back a long way. Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Hey, Jim, just before we move on from styles, if I can play devil's advocate for a minute, what would you say to someone who possibly said to you something like, well, hey, you weren't born in Cuba, you'll never play like an Afro-Cuban artist, or you're not from New Orleans, so you'll never actually be able to play a really swampy New Orleans groove. How would you sort of clear up that kind of misconception and sort of clarify, I guess, the advantages and the direction that this could take?
Yeah, I mean, the answer is that all I can do is do my best. I'm not going to be Stanton Moore because, Stanton is Stanton, and he grew up there. And I think there's, as much as I can play some of those styles, there's always going to be something that I could learn from someone who is absolutely entrenched in it. It's the difference between what I was just talking about with the rock drummers. Mm-hmm. And, I think the same is true there. That doesn't mean that I can't, from a professional standpoint, do my best to be able to cover the bases, which is that was really the basis of the book, Survival Guide for the Modern Drummer. Do you notice that the title wasn't Mastery of All Styles by Jim Riley? That would have been a lot bigger book, and I wouldn't have been able to write it, So it was the idea of writing a book called Survival Guide, because I was like, listen, this is enough. If you can do this much of this style, then you're going to be able to survive and advance. And my recommendation is always learn more and get more into the music. One of the mantras that I have really begun to incorporate in my teaching here lately is the more you know about the music that you're playing, the better you can serve it.
Beautiful.
So if the more you know about every aspect of that music, the better you can serve it. And so that's something that I'm trying to do. It's a lifelong effort, and it's something that I'm going to continue to effort. I'm going to continue to try to get better. A friend of mine heard me say in a clinic one time, and it really impacted him. He said, it's like life is like one of those people movers at the airport. He says, when you're standing still, you feel like you're holding your ground, but in actuality, you're being left behind. Wow. If you're not constantly moving forward, you're being left behind. So always continue to get better. When I landed the big gig, that would be a really easy time to kind of check out. But the truth is that's when the learning started for me. Is just trying to get better. And so I've always been like, you've got to keep learning. You've got to keep getting better. Even with songs that I've played quite literally 1,000 times, I'm still trying to play them better than I've ever played them before. And that's what keeps me motivated. It's not about perfection. It's just about going, okay, here's who I am today. Here's what I know about music today. Let me try to do the very best job I can with these songs.
That's amazing. That's great. Jim, if I can ask you if we can change topic slightly here. I guess it was on some of these online groups that we somewhat connected, and mostly because I was doing cartwheels in my kitchen agreeing with you. And I'm going to throw one of these points at you that you brought up. This was on the Drums and Drummers group on Facebook.
Mm-hmm. So nice group. It's a big group. Very big group.
It's a big group. And you made this post, and I'll read it back to you. Help me understand why a right-handed drummer would benefit from relearning all grooves open-handed. Now, I had a pretty good read through the replies of the comments on that post. Mm-hmm. And without being rude to anybody, I actually don't think people understood the question, or how can I put this nicely? I feel like there was a certain copy-paste style answer to that question without the experience behind it.
Well, I think that it's a loaded question, okay? Absolutely. It was a loaded question. And I knew that it was a loaded question. I was trying to ask it in a way that was like not going to be dismissive of somebody else's opinion. But I could expound on it a little bit more here because we've got a little bit more time. So practice time is really precious and really valuable. One of the best pieces of advice I got at a drum clinic early on in my career when I was a student was one of the clinicians said, practice now while you still have time. You know, this was before I had a wife and kids and, you know, bills and all of that kind of stuff. You know, when you're a student, if you've got time to practice, just practice as much as you possibly can. Make practicing your job, make getting great at music and listening to music. All of that is practicing. It's like they said in the movie Elf. He said, make work your new favorite. He said, make practicing your new favorite. Because it's so precious, I want to make sure that the things I'm spending time on are going to have the most benefit to me as a player. And so when I see people that are like, hey, I'm enamored with somebody because they're playing open-handed, I'm enamored with it too, but that doesn't make me want to switch over to it. It's a redundant skill. My opinion is pick an orientation, whether you're playing cross or you're playing open-handed, and get as great at playing as you possibly can. What you're going to find is there are actually, and this is something I've been really coming to lately, there are advantages to playing open-handed, and there are advantages to playing cross-handed. And they will expose themselves, and what you'll find is they're equal, and they actually zero themselves out. So whatever advantages you're going to gain here are going to become disadvantages when you're here. I'll tell you this is one that I'm really passionate about. I've been speaking with my students a lot about the idea of making your fills groove as hard as your grooves do. So if I'm playing time 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and first fill I go to is 3 and 4 and a 1. And so what I'm essentially doing is my right hand has never stopped playing time. It's going right from the fill. So if I go 1, 2, 3 and 4, and if we follow the bouncing ball, my right hand has never stopped playing time. And that's kind of a key to being able to play fills where the groove just flows through them, as opposed to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we've stopped playing time to play it, to start playing a fill. And that might have been a little Ringo-esque, but, Ringo had a really interesting philosophy, and that was that he didn't play his fills until the vocalists stopped doing what they were doing,
A true fill, right? Filling a gap, I guess.
Exactly. And so he was kind of taking that moment to really like feature the drums, which I think is really super genius. I'm talking more about the philosophy of understanding the form of the song and using fills and orchestration to help like create this really detailed foundation for a song. And when I'm doing that, I want to use first and foremost fills that I feel like have the groove flowing through them, and using this philosophy of going, okay, if I've got my right hand, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and my right hand has still never stopped playing time all the way through there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have an arsenal of fills. And what I've done with my college students and go, look, and here's a micro fill, here's a small fill, here's a medium fill, here's a large fill. Where in the song do we need the smallest fill? Maybe between two phrases of a verse. Where do we need maybe this biggest fill? Maybe on our way to the bridge, and so we can use the other fills kind of in all the other places, maybe headed from the verse to the chorus, or the chorus back to the verse, or in the midst of the chorus. And so I know it's a little bit of a forensic approach, and it's kind of about teaching how to color within the lines. But then once you get that, you can color outside the lines all you want, just as long as you know where the parameters are. So I'm trying to teach them how to do the best job of serving the song. And part of that for me is making sure that my right hand is always playing time. When you're doing this, now you're switching. Mm-hmm. And then, by the way, are you going from left-hand lead? Are we really, or are we kind of doing what Ringo did, which is lead with his left hand on a right-hand kit, which kind of leads you down to a different path? So I'm kind of more on the side of, listen, and I've thought about this a lot, and I bet you have too.
Yeah.
And this is a whole nother Mythbusters. When you get a left-handed kid, do you start them on a right-handed drum set? Do you start them on a left-handed drum set? Or do you start them on a right-handed drum set, cross-handed, and just say, hey, listen, the piano, it doesn't accommodate you, neither does the drum set. I don't even know if I know the right answer, but I know that it's an important question.
I think I've encountered that so many times, and I don't think there is an answer to it. At this point, I feel like, because I've got two kits in my teaching studio, so there's obviously the student and myself. The student can see me playing constantly. If what I'm doing doesn't appeal to them and they're left-handed and they are dead set on playing left-handed, I'm cool with it. Like, I think that's part of the important thing here in terms of misconceptions and myth busting is I don't think you're saying playing open-handed is bad or wrong, or
I'm saying it's amazing. And I'm saying that
absolutely.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm saying pick one, but I think one of the things that's a huge waste of time is doing this thing where I'm learning all this complicated stuff like this, and then I take that same time to learn all the complicated stuff like this. I've known one guy in my life that could do that extremely well, and you don't know who he is. This guy named Clyde Connors played in the Airmen of Note, which was the naval jazz band. He could literally swing, swing,
wow.
I mean, could do this whole thing, and it was like that was his shtick. And he's like, he literally is switching to traditional left-handed. And that was his shtick. But you know what? At the end of the day, nobody really cares.
No.
It's all about, does that person really make me connect with the song? Is their passionate playing, like really serving the song? And then at that point, it doesn't matter whether it's like this or anything else. I mean, if somebody, I've had some friends and students that have had various differences in their anatomy that cause them to hold the sticks in radically different ways. I don't care.
No,
as long as they play great, it doesn't really matter to me.
No,
it doesn't matter to me whether they're playing open or they're playing like this, or if they were playing with their feet. It really doesn't matter. It's just pick a style. But to me, there's too little practice time for me to have people like going, okay, now let's play all the stuff left-handed. I'm going, listen, there's a world of styles. There's a ton of language on the snare drum that we can be learning to move around the drum set. There's just so much more to work on than, for me, what is a redundant skill. Now, I'll give you a really good example of my friend, legendary drummer in Nashville, Eddie Bayers, probably one of the most recorded drummers in Nashville history. Started out playing with the Judds. He was right-handed, got in a motorcycle accident, crushed his left hand, could no longer take the pounding of that left hand. So he moved his left hand to the hi-hat and went to this thing and had to relearn how to play. I mean, you got to do what you have to do. I do the exact same thing. Rick Allen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Rick Allen has done a phenomenal job with his situation. And, I mean, you ultimately you do what you have to do. But for anybody who doesn't have any problems like that, my recommendation is pick an orientation and get to work.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you anymore. I
know. Well, that's kind of a point that we connected on. I went, this guy, who's this guy? Who's the one guy that actually knows what I'm talking about here?
Well, I think, again, and I don't want to be throwing any stones here, but I think part of this is experience. And I mean, I've been teaching a long time. I know what works. Now, if I work with a student for 5 years and we develop skills and we work on this, why would we just all of a sudden change the role that our limbs are playing on the kit? It is okay for your right hand and your left hand to have a different job on the drum kit. I'm sorry.
Exactly. It's a different job. And so here's an argument. And I didn't even make this argument too much on that post because people don't like it, but it's true. I said, just remember, if you're 85% as good open-handed as you are with your cross-handed, that means every time you go to open-handed, you suck 15% more.
Absolutely. Now, I think the other thing here is that this is real drummer brain stuff. On the surface, this seems to make sense. It seems to be complex, which as drummers, hey, we want to overcomplicate things as much as we can because we're drummers. Listen, no one cares. If you go into the studio, if you go into the studio and you need to lay down an 80 BPM shuffle and you've absolutely nailed it and the band is just in seventh heaven, is the producer going to say, okay, that was pretty good, Jim, but now can you play it left-handed? Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't at all. Well, certainly preaching to the choir on that one, Yeah, and that was funny. That was kind of one of the points that we bonded on. So let me really quick kind of explain the reason why I made that post.
Yes.
And the reason why I've made a couple of posts like it here lately. And this is going to be surprising. But the reason why I did it was because in March, my Facebook account got hacked by a hacker in Milan. And I have efforted completely reclaiming that account back. And I have been unsuccessful. And I came to a point where I just said, you know what? It's a long story. I still have, if I go post on my Instagram, it reposts onto my other Facebook, so it still serves a purpose. I have 20,000 followers on that page. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to have to start over. And I know it sucks, but I'm just going to have to start over. So I really just I started with a couple of posts, honestly, to just stir it up and to get some people going, this guy, who's this guy? Oh, this guy, I know this guy. I like this guy. And I mean, honestly, I'm just trying to reconnect with friends and fans and fellow drummers and musicians that just want to go on this journey together. So I was just kind of stirring it up to just trying to go, hey, I'm here. And I think for the most part that worked. I think I got about 500 followers now. So I only have another 19,500 to go. But no, the truth is I got a lot of those followers from a viral post that I made about finance, to be honest.
All right.
And what happened was I showed a picture of my car, and I'm sure you've got these down there. I have a Toyota Corolla.
Yep.
And it's a very obviously common car throughout the world. It's it's a compact car. I bought it for my wife in 2004, and then it's handed back down to me when she got the minivan. We have 3 kids. And so at some point, like the headlights started getting really dingy. So when I had some work done, this guy was like, hey, I can buff those headlights and make them look brand new. I'm like, for just a couple, like $100 or something? He's like, yeah. So he did it. So I posted about it and I said, hey, dig this, look at this. And I got so much like, whoa, wait a second. You're the drummer with Rascal Flatts and you drive a 2004 Corolla? And I'm like, well, yeah. And so then I went into this explanation about, I feel like comfortable living inside my means. In other words, what I tried to explain was I don't try to invest in depreciating assets. And cars are depreciating assets. Real estate is appreciating assets. So I prefer to spend money on that and not on cars. And, I try to live inside my means. And it went hugely viral, like, 50,000 likes. And, it was like crazy. So I ended up, of all places, I got a ton of followers in Africa. And it was just the concept that I was talking about was really so foreign to these people that were talking to me about it, that culturally, that the stuff they had gave them so much status in Africa. This is what they're telling me. I'm not telling you what I know. I'm telling you what Africans were telling me when they were talking to me. They were like, the stuff they had gave them so much status, and it just blew their mind to go, I don't have to play that game. I'm like, no, you don't have to play that game. Your stuff does not determine your worth.
Absolutely.
And so I got a lot of followers about that. But I mean, what's been really fun is I start back at Belmont University here in Nashville in a couple weeks, and I'm teaching a class called Career Essentials. And so I actually get to take all of this stuff and talk about it over a semester, because it's not just about developing our playing, but it's like, how can we take those skills and make sure that we can translate those into making a living? And that can be a whole nother thing.
Absolutely. And I feel like your posts, although they are very open-ended and they do stir the pot, I feel like they do sort of speak to that kind of thinking, like a little bit. Let's look at this a little bit deeper, instead of just repeating everything like a mantra. Let's actually dig into, why we think like this and perhaps change our thinking there. And if I can give you another one, which I love this. Mm-hmm. Here's another one. I think you put this in the Drummers Universe group.
Those are the two that I've kind of jumped back into pretty hard.
So I'm going to read out what you said here. The first step to becoming a great drummer is to realize it's deceivingly difficult to become a great drummer. I love that.
I feel like that was with my old Facebook post. That was a while back.
It might have been.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that was before. But yeah, I'm sure that one really kind of hit you hard and went, yeah, it is. It's a lot harder than people realize. And the thing that I end up spending a lot of time with my students, putting all the ego aside, what I try to do is I go, listen, I need you to realize where you are and where I am. And that's really important, because if you can see the difference between where you are and where I am, then then you can close that gap. Right. But if you can't see the difference, then you don't know what the differences are, then we can't close the gap. And so whether we're talking about my knowledge of music, or whether we're talking about technique, or whether we're talking about quality of sound, which most people are very nose blind to, just making sure you are creating a great sound every time you strike the instrument. You know, people talk about sound a lot with guitar players, you know, and there was a famous story that was attributed to Les Paul. Somebody walks up to him in New York City and says, "Man, that guitar sounds great." And he unplugs it and he goes to hand it to him. He says, "How's it sound now?" And, you know, It's a really good point, because without what he's doing here, it doesn't sound like anything. And I think that extends to what we do. And so we have to carry our sound with us, whether we're playing on the most cheap drum set with terrible heads on it, which I think we can create a really good sound on, or whether we're playing on the very best drum set in the world, which I think a lot of players are capable of sounding incredibly awful on. And there's nothing about a drum set that is going to make you sound better. You have to bring your sound with you. And so if you're nose blind to what it takes to create a great sound, then, whether I'm talking about your side stick sound, or whether I'm talking about playing rim shots every time, or whether I'm talking about playing in the middle of the drum every time. And that, for me, depends on how I have the drum set up. If I've got it set up in a super aggressive rock thing, then I'm playing rim shots the whole time. If I'm doing a power ballad thing, then I've got the drum set up really low, and then I'm playing in the middle of that drum. And so it's not about going rim shots are correct or playing in the middle of the drum is correct. It's more about getting a quality sound out of the drums. And
if we can continue this little sidebar into I guess essentially gear, I've done a couple of episodes at this point on what I call the gear myth. Now, I feel like most drummers, again, I don't want to throw stones at anybody. I'm going to be the most hated drummer in the world after this, but I feel like most drummers, possibly 90%, would attribute a sound or the sound they're looking for to gear. Now, if you could put it down to a percentage, how big a percent out of 100, including your skills, your knowledge, your experience, how big a percentage would you put the sound, the Jim Riley sound, down to the gear, the badge on the drums?
I'm going to include cymbals in this, which are a lot more. I think that I could get anyone to crash a cymbal, and I could crash a cymbal, and we're probably pretty close on that.
Yes.
So because of that, I'm going to bring it a little bit higher and say probably 80% of what I'm doing and maybe 20% gear, because I searched for the ride cymbal, and I had Sabian make me the ride cymbal. That was a ride I was searching for my whole life. And now that I've got a couple of these rides that they've made for me, it makes me feel a lot more comfortable. I feel like I can express myself a little bit better. There's sometimes when the gear itself can be frustrating. If I'm doing everything I can do to get to where I'm trying to get to, and the gear is not helping me get there. And that's when, the right gear can be really helpful. And sometimes the right gear is just a vibe. I play a lot of Ludwig stuff. I mean, I like the vintage stuff. And, sometimes it's just the mindset, the way it makes me feel. I know that a lot of companies make really great stuff, but there's something about, for me playing a Ludwig drum that, has a vibe to it that I really value. And it brings something to my mindset. But yeah, I mean, certainly with sticks, we want to have sticks that are aiding us to do what we want to do. With the ride cymbal, that's really important. We know what a struggle in the jazz era it was. I mean, for people to get a ride cymbal they felt comfortable with. And you'd hear about legendary drummers that had a ride cymbal, and they'd say, hey, I'll give you this ride if you can play it. And he's like, I can't play it. I can't make this thing do what you can make it do.
Yeah.
So I get that the gear is important to an extent, but I would say always at least 80% of it is the player.
Right. Yeah.
But that 20% is important.
Yeah.
I developed a bass drum beater with a company here in Nashville called Innovative, and it is a yarn beater. It's a yarn beater surrounded. It's yarn surrounding a wood core. And I love this thing. And it really has a great sound, and it helps me do my job. Any gear that helps me do my job easier is what I'm looking for. I've never been someone that says, hey, it's all about the gear. It's a little bit about the gear, but it's mostly about the player.
Absolutely. If we sort of jump back into why it is deceivingly difficult to become a great drummer, I think obviously you need to have put in a certain amount of time, right? To even be able to have the hindsight and the knowledge to go, wow, okay, man, I'm not good at that. And perhaps I worked on that thing for a long, long time and I'm still not world class at it. So is there anything else you want to add in terms of this point of being deceivingly difficult?
Yeah, so I did a clinic for a couple of the U.S. military bands at a combined facility they had on the East Coast, and I had one of the soldiers walk up, and there was a whiteboard. I said, I want you to go up to the whiteboard and draw for me the best possible circle that you can draw. So he goes up there, he spends a little second, and he draws this circle. He sits down. I said, you know what? That's really good. I said, I mean, it's obviously a circle, but I mean, if we look at it really closely, it's kind of flat over here, and it kind of comes together real funny over here. And, the idea of drawing a perfect circle is it sounds like a simple thought, but it's exceedingly difficult. And pop music is definitely that way. And that's kind of where we started. We started with this idea that if you play jazz, you can play anything. Playing pop music, you really have to think about the entire song structure from beginning to end. You have to have a plan that works all the way through. I'm talking about the voicings. That's like whether I'm playing close hi-hat or open hi-hat, or whether I'm playing the ride or the ride bell or the floor tom or the rim of the drum as a riding implement. Using the right orchestrations, using the right fills, having the right quality of sound, putting all of that stuff together is a lot more difficult than the average drummer understands. And it's not an ego thing. It's just if I can get them to understand that, then we can close the gap. And then closing the gap isn't very hard. If you go, oh gosh, Jim's quality of sound is so much better than mine, I want to get more consistent like that. Or they go, Jim's decision-making is really nice. I don't want to have Jim's decision-making, but I want my decision-making on that level. I want to be able to explain myself. Like, why did I play that fill? Why did I go to that voicing? Because if someone asks me, and they're not going to, but if somebody asks me, I can tell them, okay, well, here's what I did. I'm playing the close hi-hat on the verse because the verse is where the story is being told. So I want to use a voicing that's not getting in the way of that. When I get to the chorus, I'm using the open hi-hat. Why am I not using the ride? Because I'm going to use the ride on the guitar solo. I'm saving it for that. There's a reason why I'm doing everything that I'm doing. And a lot of times they'll say, a really great player is playing checkers when everyone else is playing chess. They're just kind of looking to jump somebody, looking to move. A real chess player is thinking 5, 6, 7, whole game ahead of where everybody else is thinking. And when I'm playing a song, I look at a song and I go, okay, I got a plan. and this is what I'm gonna do with it. And then you know what? I play it, and if it doesn't come out the way that I think, that plan needs some adjusting, because I just did not vibe with the crash cymbal on the bridge. So I'm going to go to the toms on the bridge, and I'm going to adjust that plan. Or you know what? I went to the ride as a default for the intro, but now I realize that maybe I should have stayed on the hi-hat and let the intro just kind of blend into the verse. And, all of that stuff is stuff I'm thinking about that, sometimes the average player isn't thinking about. So if I can get them thinking that way, it's very easy to close the gap. Because let me tell you, I am not a complicated player. I can do some things that people will appear complicated and appear fancy. But in actuality, they're all very simple concepts that I just happen to do extremely well.
Absolutely. I think one thing that I will sort of go through, a little strategy mindset system I'll go through with some of my more advanced students is exactly this concept. And I'll say, for example, if we want to be really brutal about this, one of my favorite drummers of all time, Jeff Porcaro, and let's just for argument's say he's the top of the tree in his era, and his phone is ringing off the hook, and he's turning down work, and he's giving work to his buddies, Kurt Pescara, and whoever else, because he cannot do it all. If we have that as the top of the tree, you could ask yourself, how often is my phone ringing? If we're talking about being a great drummer and we think it's easy, how often is your phone ringing? Like, are you turning down work?
That's a great point. That's a great point, and I'll extend that point to. There's been a lot of videos that the American actor Jason Alexander people have reposted things for him, and he said something that I think is on the next level of that, which is you can no longer wait for the phone to ring. You have to create your own opportunities. Yeah. You want to have a band you can't get fired from? Start a band. These actors and actresses get tired of waiting by the phone. They decided to create their own production company, buy their own scripts, and create their own work. And in a sense, that's something that I've done a lot of with the teaching that I do and the different seminars that I've done and plans that I have for the future of doing more online teaching is all about, not waiting for the phone to ring, but creating more of my own opportunities. And that way I can always have a little bit more control of my career.
Oh man, there's obviously so much we could talk about. And Jim, I really, really do appreciate your time, man.
Hey, listen, I could literally talk all night on this stuff, and I would. My son's sitting right there. There he is. And
how could you leave him sitting there?
Yeah. Before we do that, I'll give you a quick glimpse of the Drum Dojo studio here.
Oh, look at that.
Pretty crazy.
That is beautiful.
Yeah. So anyways, really great to talk to you. Really great to get to meet you. And I will catch up with you again soon.
Absolutely, Jim. Take care, my man.
Thank you very much.